สสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะนะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะนะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะพุทธังธัมมังสังฆังนะมัสสามิ Blessings, good evening. As you know, I was in Singapore last weekend teaching some of you meditation, which was a very pleasant experience. It was interesting when I checked in for the flight to go from Melbourne to Singapore. The person checking us in asked us, why are you going to Singapore? And I answered, I'm going to teach meditation. And the person checking us in said, I need some of that immediately, which is a very common expression of stress or recognition that you have agitation or your mind is not completely peaceful. It's a very common thing people say when they meet monks and they ask you what you do, you say you meditate. They will say, oh, I need to meditate. And then interestingly, on the way home from Singapore, waiting at Melbourne Airport to go through customs, the customs officer said, what were you doing in Singapore? And I said, teaching meditation. And the custom officer said, oh, I need some of that. So it doesn't matter what walk of life you're in, everyone seems to need meditation, or at least they have that idea they need it. As I was talking to that customs officer, there was also a young mother who'd been on the plane with a young girl, maybe 2 or 3 years old, who could walk but couldn't speak very well. And she just went across in front of us to pick up her trolley, luggage trolley, and because she had left her girl standing a few meters away, the girl immediately panicked, I guess being in an airport, and started screaming for her mum. And so the customs officer said to me, I think she needs meditation as well. So it's just a more modern response to things, isn't it? Nowadays everyone knows that there is this thing called meditation. Sometimes they use the word mindfulness synonymously with meditation. People know when we're stressed, when we're worried, we're angry, we're feeling agitated, we need to do something about it. So it's a good thing, and perhaps the spread of Buddhism in particular and Buddhist meditation techniques have meant that people are much more aware of what's available and how it can help us. Whether any of those people actually go and do some meditation or learn it, I don't know. But that's just the idea, I need to meditate, is coming from a good place, isn't it? It's a recognition that we have some internal stress or suffering, and we need to do something about it, and that there is an option. You have methods and ways that can help you deal with your internal discontent. Ajahn Chah used to say, one of the ways he'd talk about why people suffer and how they're suffering, he'd say that the people nowadays, or probably people since the beginning of time, their eyes are well trained, their external eyes, their physical eyes are well trained, and they see and know many things in this world, but their internal eye is not well trained, and that's why they suffer. The internal eyes, we say the eye of the mind, the eye of Dhamma. Sometimes they say Dhamma Chaksu. Chaksu means eye. So the Dhamma eye is not well trained. And when it's not well trained, then we're caught into delusion and confusion, and that's why we suffer. So one of the things you're doing when you practice meditation is opening the Dhamma eye, or training the Dhamma eye to see better, to see more clearly, to be less fuzzy or less blind. But that takes effort, that takes training. And this is what you're doing when you're sitting there with your eyes closed, maybe watching the breath or doing any other kind of meditation technique. You're opening the internal eye. You shut the external eye for a while by closing your eyes, and you open the internal eye. Even when you're walking meditation, as we learn on retreats, we learn to walk back and forth mindfully. You're also opening the internal Dhamma eye when you're doing that, even though your eyes, external eyes, are still open. But if you've ever done walking meditation, you'll realize you need to just focus your eyesight on where you're walking, maybe keep your eyes cast down on the ground in front of you. The Buddha said about 2 meters away, the distance of a plough. Say you're a farmer ploughing the ground, walking behind a buffalo or a cow. Your plough may be 2 meters long, so you put your eyes down on the ground 2 meters ahead of you. So you're still seeing with your external physical eye, but you're not looking around, getting distracted by sights. You just cast your eyes down, and then you put your attention somewhere else. You may be on the feet, or on the breath, or just observing thoughts and feelings arising, passing away, whatever. But even when you're walking with your eyes open, your internal Dhamma eye, you can still be training that, to know internally your experience. And this is what we're learning in the Buddhist path, to open the Dhamma eye and train the Dhamma eye, the internal eye, with Dhamma, with mindfulness and wisdom and all the qualities that we're cultivating in this path. So even to practice, say, morality, keep precepts, you need to have this inner awareness as well, because the mind is the forerunner of everything. So whatever we say and do begins as thoughts, as intentions. And even if you're sitting still, not externally, not doing anything with anybody else, not communicating with the world, or not going around doing anything when you're sitting still, mentally you're still active. Things are still going on. So we need to develop and train this inner Dhamma eye to know our mind. And the reason people find it so challenging and frustrating is mainly because they haven't done it enough. How long have you lived in the world? However old you are, whether you're 10, 30, 50, 70, whatever age you are, you probably would, if you're honest, have to admit that you spent most of your life ignoring the inner Dhamma eye, not training it, not being aware of your mind very well, not very clearly, not seeing it or knowing it very clearly. Because we spend all our time letting our mind go out through our senses, through the physical eye, but our ears and tongue and nose and skin. Or even when we are thinking, most of the time we're not that aware or very mindful of what we're thinking. So it's like the Dhamma eye is closed and you're not functioning much of the time. And if you've been living in the world for many years, well, that means for many years your Dhamma eye has just been there, unused. It's like you have this unused potential, undeveloped potential sitting there in your mind. It's only when you come to meditate that you're starting to bring it out, to train it and develop it. So that's one way we look at meditation, is this practice of opening up the Dhamma eye, seeing more clearly the way things are. And sometimes it's sort of, you're seeing things that you already sensed, you already had an inkling, an idea of what's going on in your mind. You're aware of many thoughts and feelings, and you may be half aware of why you feel stressed sometimes, why you suffer. Other times it's a complete shock, isn't it? As you become more mindful, you notice mental habits, moods, views you're holding, things you believe in that you completely missed, you weren't even aware of before. So it can be quite shocking or surprising what you find when you start opening the Dhamma eye. But nevertheless, if you have faith in the Buddha and teachers such as Ajahn Chah, even if it is a bit confronting, challenging to do this, it's worthwhile. And Ajahn Chah said, this is the way to real peace and to get beyond our stress and our suffering, is you have to develop this inner eye, the Dhamma eye. The alternative, Ajahn Chah used the word fumbling. He said the alternative is we go through our life kind of fumbling around, never really clear why we're suffering and where it comes from and what's going on. We're not aware of cause and result or cause and effect if we don't open this Dhamma eye. We may know many things in the world. We have skills and knowledge and we can do many things and go places. But still, if we haven't trained the internal awareness of the mind, then it's like we're just fumbling around, not quite sure why we feel stressed and not sure what to do about it either. So somebody who has trained and practiced, developed mindfulness, cultivated this path, sila, samadhi, panya, wisdom, insight, they say they're somebody who has opened the Dhamma eye. And you might say somebody who's practiced to a point where their insight and clarity and the peace of mind is at least established. They may not be fully enlightened, but they've sort of established themselves on the path, so they have no more doubts about the Buddha, the Dhamma, the Sangha. It's like that person, their Dhamma eye is now fully open and it's not going to get closed again. Whereas somebody who's just beginning the practice, well, maybe their eye is open sometimes and then sometimes it closes up again. Like when we get deluded by our own thoughts, our beliefs, our views. And you'll notice as you start practicing that sometimes we hold on to beliefs and views and we think what we think and what we believe in is correct. But only later you realize it was not correct. Sometimes we think certain things are for our benefit, our happiness, certain courses of action, things we do or just things we believe in are going to bring us happiness. It's only later you realize, no, it's not. It's actually for suffering. So as you open the Dhamma eye, you're looking at, well, what is suffering and where is it coming from? And the Buddha said, well, it's coming from ignorance, unawareness, which conditions craving and wanting, delighting in things, holding on to things, which create conditions clinging and attachment. So we attach to ideas of what happiness are, maybe only through time. As the Dhammacakka, the Dhamma eye opens, you realize what you were clinging to is actually for suffering, not for real happiness. So if you cling to anything with ignorance, you start to suffer because of that. They're just like something like traveling, they're flying to Singapore, say an aeroplane is something very useful for human beings. You can travel to another part of the world and do something good, like go and hear the Dhamma or practice the Dhamma or go and help somebody. An aeroplane can be a means of technology that's quite useful for us as human beings. Or it can be a source of suffering. Some people, they hear an aeroplane flying overhead and they get very annoyed, angry. Why is there this aeroplane? Like when I was a young monk, I stayed in a monastery on the edge of Bangkok near the airport, and there were jumbo jets and different kinds of jets flying over every few minutes. Another plane went right over the monastery. And some people would come there and practice meditation. They get really angry. They say, oh, why are there so many planes? They're so loud. So something as simple as an aeroplane, it can be a very useful thing, or it can be a curse, and you see it as some kind of burden and distraction and disturbing you. What's the difference? It's the way you look at it, isn't it? The aeroplane itself is just a collection of metal and other materials that human beings make with a purpose. But how you look at it, your view and the way you relate to it, your perception, that will depend, won't it, on the situation. And if your Dhamma eye is open, well, it's just a thing. It's just a piece of technology that's quite useful to move us from A to B, and it is just what it is. But if you're caught up in a certain belief or view, well, it can be a cause of global warming. So maybe you get angry when you see aeroplanes because you think, oh, they use fuel and they add to pollution and they heat the atmosphere up, they're no good. Or maybe you're somebody who's meditating and you don't like the sound. Or some people don't like being confined, so they get on an aeroplane and they freak out and get really angry or upset because they're confined to a seat for many hours. It all depends what your view is, doesn't it? And life is full of this sort of experience. You have something, and when you see it as useful, well, then your mind is at ease, maybe. But if you get caught into or attached to a certain view, then that same thing can become a source of pain or suffering, something to get rid of. And you see that every day, don't you? People argue about their views on what's right and what's wrong, what's good and what's bad. But when you open the Dhamma eye, you start to look at things slightly differently. So you don't just see what is wrong and what's right, you see a view or a belief. And you know beliefs and views are things that are conditioned by experience, what we've heard, what we've read, our own personal experience. But if you attach to them, even a good view can become like a weapon or a cause of suffering, can't it? So, something like, maybe you're a Buddhist and you practice the 5 precepts. And you say everyone should keep the 5 precepts because the 5 precepts are good for humans. And they are. If everyone follows the 5 precepts, they're good. It will mean we live together very peacefully, harmoniously, cooperate and won't harm each other, won't steal, won't physically harm each other, won't verbally harm each other and so on. But then sometimes you meet people who don't keep the 5 precepts. So does that make you angry? Maybe your attachment to a belief that the 5 precepts are good for the world and good for people and they're what we should follow can actually become painful when you meet someone who doesn't follow the 5 precepts. You may look down on them or criticize them, get angry with them. Where's that coming from? It's coming from the belief that everyone should follow the 5 precepts. So you encounter someone who doesn't, that challenges your belief, your view, and so maybe you get annoyed or saddened, angry, because your inner eye, the Dhamma eye, hasn't recognized that you're clinging to a belief. Even a belief in a good thing can be like that. Or maybe you meet somebody who doesn't have the same inspiration in Buddhism as you. you've maybe been following the Buddha for many years and you practice the Buddhist teachings and it's brought you great happiness, which is good. Then you meet someone else who doesn't like Buddhism or finds some fault with it, something just doesn't appeal to them, and maybe they say things that are disparaging or critical of Buddhists or the Buddhist teachings, and you get angry again, or you get suffering. So beliefs and views, even in good things, can also cause us suffering when we hold on to them too tightly. And who sees that? Well, that inner Dhamma eye can recognize, maybe there's a belief here that I'm holding on to that's correct, correct for me according to my experience or what I've heard and what I believe in. But maybe on another level, it's still a cause of suffering because I'm clinging to it blindly. The Dhamma eye, internal Dhamma eye hasn't recognized that. And there's an automatic identification or grasping at that view as correct. So this inner Dhamma eye is a very useful thing to develop because it gives us the ability to look at our experience from different angles. And particularly we're looking to see, well, where does suffering come from? What's its cause? And although the things in the world are involved in our suffering as well, particularly the Buddha was helping us to see internally where the deepest root causes of our suffering are coming from. And to do that, you have to open this Dhamma eye. You have to practice mindfulness and investigate inwards. Even to see a belief that something that you hold to, belief, your view about something, to see if you're holding on too tightly or in the wrong way, grasping in the wrong way to that belief, that view. Like I'm sitting here in this meditation hall here, you can only see a little bit probably on the screen. When we have a meditation class or a teaching or some kind of event, that this hall can be full of people. But at the moment, there's just 2 people sitting in front of me. It's empty. So if it's just 2 people, you might say, oh, this hall is big, it's huge. But if we're holding some event and the whole hall is completely full of people, maybe it's got people overflowing. You say, well, the hall is too small. The hall is just the hall, isn't it? It's just the brick walls and the roof and the floor. That doesn't change. But how you perceive it, how you look at it changes, doesn't it? And that can cause suffering. If you want a small hall, then the hall is too big. Or if you have a hall that's full of people, you want an even bigger hall. So then the hall becomes too small. So Ajahn Chah was very good at teaching us to develop this inner eye that looks at our experience and particularly looks at the way we view things and how we hold on to our views and how that causes us suffering. Strictly speaking, according to the Buddhist text, we cling to these 5 aggregates: the body, feelings, perceptions, thought formations, and sense consciousness. That's the basis for our clinging. So we all know what that's like. We cling to the body. So when the body is healthy and happy, we're happy. When the body is strong, no illness, no aches and pains, we're happy, we're content and satisfied with it. We don't even think about it, do we? Normally that's when we go about our business, if there's no pain, we like that. We just go about our business, don't have to think about our body at all. We're well fed, well rested, no illness, no disease, no injury. We don't even think about the body because we can just go about our business, do exactly what the mind wants. So we can follow craving very well. So that often the Dhamma eye goes to sleep then, doesn't it? When you get what you want, the Dhamma eye inside is asleep. It's only when there's an interruption to that. So if you get an injury or you fall ill or you're hungry or you're tired from overwork or something, then the body becomes an issue. You feel it, you know it. And if the Dhamma eye is working, well, it will be able to say, oh, this is just the body that is now tired or ill. And it produces feelings, maybe painful feelings. And you can know, oh, painful feelings are like this. But if the Dhamma eye is working, the eye of wisdom, you can accept, they're just impermanent and they come up through their causes. They'll pass, you've seen them pass before, or if they don't pass, you just have to be patient with them. Maybe there's nothing much you can do about them. But you don't have to create suffering out of them, because the Dhamma eye is working well. There's mindfulness, there's wisdom, and you can see your experience of this body with Dhamma. But if the Dhamma eye is still closed, it's asleep, then you just react, don't you? So you have some pain, and you can't do what you want to do, you get annoyed or you get frustrated. Most people, when they experience pain, it stimulates some kind of irritation, aversion, anguish, insecurity, sometimes just depression. It's like the Dhamma eye is not yet open, so we're attaching to the body and we want it to be comfortable, working properly, and something's gone wrong, so then we take that personally and we make a personal problem out of it. When the Dhamma eye is open, we're seeing things as Dhamma rather than just taking everything personally, or me, mine, my problem, my body that's sick or ill or hungry or tired. We're just seeing things more as conditions, and this is the way it is. Currently the body is injured or ill or hungry. The Dhamma eye takes the me, mine, myself out of the equation, and you're just looking and observing or witnessing things as they are. And that's why we need to train this Dhamma eye, to reflect on the Dhamma, bring up the mindfulness. But when the Dhamma eye closes down, it's back to my body, my problem, and we suffer. We worry, we fear, we get angry, we get agitated. As you're practicing the Dhamma, you realize, a lot of our suffering is just the way we're looking at our experience. And if we're taking it all personally, following our desires, trying to get every desire fulfilled, every wish fulfilled, then we suffer. When you open the Dhamma eye, you start to see craving as craving, wanting as wanting, rather than trying to follow it all the time. You're seeing it as the cause of suffering. And the Buddha said, what did the Buddha say? He said, when you recognize craving as the cause of suffering, abandon it. Let it go. But to abandon craving, you have to see it for what it is. So that's where you need the wisdom of the Dhamma eye. A large part of our meditation practice is, we say, learning this, opening the Dhamma eye, you're learning to see craving, as the cause of suffering. Craving gives rise to clinging, which is just the hardening of craving. As Buddhadasa used to say, craving is the dog barking, clinging is the dog biting. So it bites. When you really cling, you suffer more, don't you? You have the initial craving, it tends to be the movement of the mind, wanting this, not wanting that. Clinging is where it bites, where it really gets stuck in the mind. So say you hear the aeroplane noise, and it's maybe very loud and unpleasant, but if it may give rise to craving, but your Dhamma eye says, but it's just the way it is. It's just an unpleasant noise. You let that craving pass away. That's the end of it, isn't it? You establish awareness of the impermanence of the aircraft noise. But if there's no Dhamma eye, no mindfulness, no reflection, then it becomes a problem. I'm hearing this loud aircraft, I'm annoyed by it, I'm fed up with it, and your mind creates all kinds of suffering out of it. Or if you're in a meditation hall, it may be full and you're saying, oh, it's too small, or it may be big and you say, oh, it's too big. But it is what it is, and if your Dhamma eye is open, it just is what it is. You don't have to create suffering out of it, you don't have to cling to it. Or if you see another person who doesn't follow the 5 precepts, maybe someone you live with or work with, and they say things, do things that are harmful to themselves, to others. It may not be pleasant, but with the Dhamma eye, it is just the way it is. And you may practice compassion and try and help that person, or wish them well at least, but you don't create suffering out of it. But if the Dhamma eye is shut, it's closed, then maybe your view that everyone should keep the 5 precepts and someone doesn't keep the 5 precepts is bad, wrong, then you suffer, don't you? Because you're clinging to that view. So the Buddha was giving us the method, the way to help us understand better where does suffering come from. But you need to be able to look internally really to get to see the details of it, to see with awareness, with understanding what's going on. And so we're always learning this ability, developing this ability to turn attention inwards and know your mind. Be able to see your own mind with the mind. The mind sees the mind knows the mind. The mind knows thoughts, feelings, and what does it know? Well, it knows they are arising and ceasing. What's arising and ceasing is impermanent. It's not a self because it arises and ceases. If you really see that clearly, then you don't cling to things so tightly because you know they're constantly passing away. Even beliefs and views arise and pass away. And maybe it's a good exercise sometimes just to contemplate your life and how your views have changed since you were young. Some people start off with one religion and their views on religion change over time, and they maybe change religions. People's political views change, their views on what they like change, what they think is good for the world, good for themselves change. You might say it's one part of wisdom, isn't it? Being able to look at yourself and see how you've changed over time. And as you see those changes in what you believe in, what you view as right, wrong, good, bad, that's wisdom, isn't it? You're seeing the evolution of your views and how things have changed through the different conditioning that you've had. As you establish mindfulness and do that, your mind becomes a little bit more agile. Then you're more open to accept new views maybe, or at least investigate them. Maybe you investigate them, discard them as wrong or incorrect. But at least you're more open-minded to look and learn. If you reflect back on, say, your personal history of what you believed in, what you viewed as good and bad, right and wrong, you realize, things have changed over time. Even the Buddha had to do this. We all know the life story of the Buddha. The first 6 years of the Buddha's practice, once he left home, he was practicing what we call the ascetic practices, practicing very hard, tough practices, fasting, holding his breath, pushing his body physically, and really just harming himself. We call it the way of self-mortification, Atikila Yoga. Until he realized that it's not that useful. He developed certain skills, and he developed great patience and effort and endurance. But he found that it didn't produce wisdom because the Dhamma eye, the internal eye, hadn't completely opened. He was still practicing, fumbling along, thinking maybe this is the way to enlightenment, until he finally discarded it and said, no, this is not the way. The other extreme, what we call Kama Sukhalikana Yoga, he already knew about, because from the lay life you could say he'd been following that. Most of the people in the world assume the more wealth you have, the more pleasant experiences you have, the more power you have, the more influence, reputation you have, the happier you'll be. But it's not guaranteed either, because sensual happiness, which is what that means, your attachment, the blind attachment to sensual happiness, doesn't lead to a peaceful mind. You attach to wealth, power, influence. These things are still impermanent, unsatisfactory, unreliable, uncontrollable. They're not sure. And the Buddha already understood that in his lay life, so he discarded that as the way to true or permanent happiness. But also the way of self-mortification wasn't the way to happiness either. So that led him to, on the night of his enlightenment, discover the middle way, opening the Dhamma eye to the middle way and realizing if you cling to anything with this sense of self, you suffer. Even good things. You cling to pleasure, sense pleasure, it leads you to suffering because it's impermanent, it doesn't last. It agitates your mind. When it runs out, you're not peaceful if you're clinging from a place of ignorance or unawareness. As we see every day, isn't it? You have some pleasant experience and you want it to last. The Buddha saw that. He said, clinging to sense pleasures, even when you've got them, they condition suffering. It's because the Dhamma eye is not open, it's not realizing and seeing the impermanence of them. So the Buddha's teaching comes from this opening the Dhamma eye, seeing that when you cling, when you follow craving, clinging to views, to beliefs, to your feelings, to your thoughts as self, which is what clinging is. You cling means you identify strongly, you give strong importance to those views, those thoughts. You suffer. Because they're conditioned things, they change. Your views will change. Maybe you don't even realize. Half the time our views and beliefs are changing on us and we don't realize because we're constantly being fooled by them. We're being deluded by them, being tricked by them. When you open the Dhamma eye, you're sort of establishing mindfulness and this investigative ability of the mind internally to look at things from a place of peace and stillness. And you're saying, now I can see a belief as a belief, a view as a view. And you see how it conditions you, how it affects your body, your mind, and the way you are, and what you see as right and wrong. So the Buddha said even what he taught, say the Four Noble Truths, is not just to be believed in. Maybe in the beginning you take them as a belief, you say, I believe the Four Noble Truths are probably correct. But until you've actually opened the Dhamma eye and seen them, you can't just believe them. They're not just as a belief that proves you're a Buddhist by believing in the Four Noble Truths. They're more like a vehicle for investigation, a method, a means to investigate your experience. It's only as you practice and develop your own inner understanding and wisdom that you'll really come to see the Four Noble Truths or realize the Four Noble Truths. The Buddhism is a bit different from many religious practices or other things that people believe in, because it's not a set of beliefs you just accept or don't accept. The Buddha said, put them to the test through your practice. Only then should you believe what he taught as true. When you've practiced for yourself and found, yes, it's true, what he taught is true. Feelings are impermanent. Therefore, I shouldn't cling to them too tightly because they're impermanent. Because when you cling, you suffer with those feelings. You attach to the pleasurable feelings, the pleasant feelings, so you want more of them and you get addicted to them. You're averse to the painful feelings, you're constantly falling into aversion when you experience pain. The Dhamma eye says pleasant and unpleasant feelings are just that much. They're just feelings that arise, pass away. When the Dhamma eye is closed, feelings become something that are very personal. Me, my feelings, whether they're physical feelings based on the body, or just subtle mental experiences of pleasure and displeasure. When the Dhamma eye is closed, they become who we are. I am my feelings. So we're thrown all over the place. And when things are going well and we have pleasant feelings coming up, we're happy. And when things are going badly, we're experiencing a lot of pain, we're unhappy and sad and angry. And that's our experience of life, up and down all the time. The one who opens the Dhamma eye through this practice of training in this path, Sila, Samadhi, Panya, then they develop some stability of mind. It's like they gain this inner stability or stillness that can see the body, feelings, thoughts, perceptions as they are, but they don't cling to them as self. So they say somebody who's opened the Dhamma eye, they see suffering, they know suffering. They don't just theorize about it or believe in it, they know it. They know, oh, this is suffering. But they know suffering and they know the end of suffering. And they know suffering is an experience that arises and ceases. They know that. They see it, they know it. It's no longer just a theory or a belief. They're actually knowing it through their experience. And if you know suffering arising, suffering ceasing, then you don't cling. You know, oh, that's suffering, that's just something to be left there, as it were. So when you say you're having a good meditation, well, that's when the Dhamma eye is open and seeing things clearly, so you can allow painful feelings to arise, pass away, thoughts to come and go, even painful memories to come and go. You can see that, you see them just as memories and let them go. But if meditation is not going so well, Dhammacakka eye is closed, then we tend to cling, don't we? We cling to that feeling or that memory as me, and then we become a certain way. We become stressed, we become suffering. Often we're repeating the same old mistakes, aren't we? Because we're blindly fumbling around, the Dhammacakka eye is not being well trained. We often repeat the same old mistakes. We kind of know it, but we don't know what to do about it yet. We haven't developed the right causes to let go. So, we keep falling into suffering, despair, anguish, insecurity, fear, make the same mistakes. There was someone at the monastery today saying they've been in 3 relationships now in their life, and each one has ended in tears, ended in splitting up from their partner, suffering, unhappiness. And it's quite a common experience. You have a relationship which at the beginning seems good, and then gradually it changes, and then in the end, unfortunately, split apart for whatever reasons. Incompatible, not a good match, whatever. And then we go and do it again, and again. So for that person, I said, it's time to come and live in the monastery, maybe. Maybe enough. Or at the very least, we need to practice more meditation. If you keep falling into the same old suffering, despair, despair with yourself, self-criticism, self-aversion, unhappy with your life, who you are, who you think you are, then this is the time to practice meditation, isn't it? This is the time to develop your skill with mindfulness and investigation. Open the Dhamma eye. Maybe you can reduce a bit of that suffering, you can change some of those habits. Really, there's suffering there's always some good in there if you take it as something to learn from. We have to learn from suffering, not just give in to it or surrender to it, but actually learn from it. Then it may be, there's always something good in there, even though some of the lessons we learn are quite painful. If you can see them as lessons, where you're clinging too much, you're attaching too much, expecting too much, wanting too much, wanting the wrong thing or wanting something that's impossible, when you can see that, then you can learn from, even from a painful experience of suffering. When I was staying in that monastery that had all the aeroplanes flying overhead, even through the middle of the night there were jet planes going overhead. There's no insulation in the little hut I was living in a little timber hut. So sometimes you'd wake up at 12 p.m. or 12 a.m. with a jet plane rattling your hut, like the hut rattled because the jets were so low and so loud. The hut would rattle, so I'd be woken up by this rattling. Then 1 a.m., 2 a.m., so you'd sleep for a little bit and then you're waking up again by the next plane. So sometimes I just gave up and said, what's the point of even trying to sleep? I'll just meditate. So I was tired, but I'll practice mindfulness. So then I thought, well, maybe the jet planes have a certain advantage here. They're helping me to be more mindful, meditate longer than I would normally. If it's nice and quiet and conditions are how you like, then maybe you sleep too much. Sometimes when there's a loud noise, it makes you try harder in your meditation. Suffering can do that, can it? It can spur you on to try harder, to look, to learn, where am I clinging to, what's going on here. Maybe if you're angry or sad or upset, you have to look at that and learn. Or sometimes you need to use some humor and laugh at the situation. And that's a sign of the agile mind that's looking back at experience and seeing maybe suffering, but then laughing at it. Chuckling at our own foolishness, how we laugh, how we attach to things, cling to things and get upset in our mind. Now you all know the Queen of England just passed away, and they say that was one of her skills. She could laugh at herself, laugh at different situations. Imagine if you're a monarch, you've got a whole country or a whole commonwealth to run, to serve, and you've got to deal with many people, many situations through your life. There's one way you keep your mind free from suffering, isn't it? Be able to laugh at yourself. And that means you can step outside of whatever the particular problem is and look at it in a different way. It's another way of freeing your mind from suffering, when you can see maybe where you're attaching too strongly to your roles. And if you're a monarch, you'd probably be very likely to attach to being the leader, being the king or the queen. But if you can have a sense of humor, it means you can lighten up in a situation where you may be tempted to take things too seriously, give too much importance, too much weight to your role or to your reaction to something or your expectations. Imagine you're a king or a queen. You probably expect many things, and many of those expectations will never be met. So they say that was one of the endearing qualities of the Queen of England who died. She could laugh at herself, laugh at other people, or laugh at situations to help lighten things up, not attach so strongly. Even the Buddha sometimes would smile when he realized how foolish someone would be. He'd smile, and maybe try and find a way to get them to see their own foolishness coming from their attachment. Ajahn Kalyano, they say that was one of his strong points. He's able to laugh at situations, laugh at himself, laugh at the world, or get people to laugh at themselves when they're holding on too tightly. Because that's what we do, don't we? From our delusion, when our Dhamma eye is not open, we cling. Clinging means giving too much importance to your thoughts or your views, your opinions. That's why we argue, that's why we fight. We try to control things, we try to get things going our own way. And when you try and control everything, which is what maybe somebody in a position like a leadership position like a king or a queen would do, if they try to control too much, they're going to suffer, aren't they? The more you've got to control, the more you're going to suffer. If you've got a whole kingdom, a whole country or empire to look after, the opportunity for suffering there would be like huge. But if you can at least step back and look at yourself and chuckle at, maybe the mind that says, I am king, I am queen, I'm in charge, and wanting everyone to do exactly what you want, and then they don't, which is what people do, isn't it? They don't do what you want. If you can see that and laugh about it, then you know how to free your mind from suffering. And the Buddha might smile. Sometimes they say even the Buddha smiles. In the Abhidhamma they call it the hasitupada citta, isn't it? When the Buddha smiles, when he sees something, maybe he sees a hungry ghost and knows, this hungry ghost, somebody who had made a certain amount of bad karma is reborn in that realm. The Buddha sees something in a situation that nobody else sees, so he just smiles, and then the monks ask him, Venerable Sir, why are you smiling? Well, I saw that preta, that hungry ghost there, been sitting there on that rock for hundreds of years or a long time as the fruits of his bad karma. The Buddha is smiling. He's not smiling in disparaging or looking down. He's just smiling because it's like understanding something, understanding the karma of that being. Even the Buddha had a sense of humor in different situations. It's one of the attributes of the mind, the Dhamma eye. You can look at yourself from a place of detachment, and then if there's something to laugh about, well, you can laugh about it. The foolishness of the craving, the attachment that takes over the mind. If you can laugh about it, it helps. So maybe for tonight, I'll leave you with those Dhamma reflections. Hopefully it's opened your Dhamma eye a little bit. I'll leave the talk there.